Hey everyone, this is Droid Girl. Welcome to my channel where we create digital chaos on Android. Are you someone with some programming experience and you might be interested in getting to Android development? You come to the right place. In this video, we're gonna go over how to download and install Android Studio, create a new project, get familiarized with the different tool windows, and last but not least, we'll build and run an Android app together. You might be wondering, what are the prerequisites for Android development? Do you need to have a physical Android phone? What kind of programming language are we going to use? Well, I think the requirements are really simple. All you need for now is just a computer with internet. You don't need to have a physical Android phone. In terms of programming language, we're going to be using Kotlin, which is the modern language that is typically used for Android development. It's similar to Java, but it's more concise and user-friendly. So if you have background with Java, hopefully ramping up Kotlin should be pretty easy for you. For those of you who don't have experience with either Java or Kotlin, I think it would be helpful to do a little crash course on Kotlin just to get familiarized with it a little bit. I don't think you'll need any advanced knowledge of Kotlin just for beginner Android development, but I think it will come in handy as we get deeper into the weeds. So as a recap, all you need for now is a computer with fast internet and some understanding of Java or Kotlin. The first step is to download Android Studio, which is the official IDE or integrated development environment for Android app development, aka where we're going to do most of our work at. So in order to do that, let's head over to developer.android.com/studio, which is the official website for Android Studio. And hopefully you'll see a big button for downloading the latest version. At the time of the recording, the latest version is Hedgehog, but if you see a different version, that's totally normal. It just means that the software has been updated by Google. And let's make sure that we agree to the terms and conditions before we hit download for the appropriate version. Now, I'm on a MacBook, and if you are using a different operating system, hopefully the process for downloading and installing should be pretty straightforward as well. And I'll just see you on the other side. Now that we have successfully downloaded the disk image, let's open it and drag it to applications. Now when we bring up Spotlight Search and search for Android Studio, it will show up, and let's open it. Awesome, so hopefully you'll see this welcome window, and let's create a new project by clicking New Project. Make sure that the phone and tablet template is being selected, and let's choose Empty Activity, which is a template with Jetpack Compose, which is the modern UI toolkit for building Android application. Let's hit Next. This is where we give our application a name. For this tutorial, let's just create an app that shows some greetings. So we're going to name it Greetings, and as you'll notice, the package name is being automatically updated to reflect the app name. And we can just leave everything else as the default and hit Finish to create the project. I'm going to close this window. Okay, you can see that the project is being created and there's some stuff going on at the bottom of the IDE. This is just Android Studio and Gradle doing its work to set up our project and pull the dependencies. It might take a minute or two. Let's just be patient and wait until everything is complete, which it is now. And this is good news because we can start working on our app. So hopefully you'll see a main activity that's automatically opened. And let's just read through it really quick. It's implementing something called a component activity, and it's overriding a method on create. And within that method, we're using some theme, which wraps around a surface, which contains a greeting function, which is something that we defined, and you can see that we're showing a text that says hello name, where we pass in the name as a parameter. And there's another function here called greeting preview. As you might be able to imagine, a preview basically gives you a preview of the UI component while we're developing the app, which can be really convenient because it lets us see what we're building in real time without needing to run the app. So how do we see this preview? Well, there's a button called Split on the top right corner of the IDE, and let's click that. So the first time you click it, you'll need to click Build and Refresh. And let's just wait. Awesome. So we can see this preview here, which corresponds to this greeting preview function. And it shows Hello Android because we're passing in Android as the name. And we can change it to my name, Droid Girl, which is totally my real name. And you can see that the preview is being updated in real time, which is really cool. What if we want to give our text a little character? Well, we can change its font size, for example, to be 50 SP. And we'll go over what SP means in a future video, but not today. Okay, great. It's bigger now, as we might expect. Let's add a new line here. Okay, cool. So this is interesting. There's some overlap between the two lines, and this is because we didn't set the line height. And let's make sure that we fix that. Cool. That looks better. And let's give the text a background color of maybe blue. Cool. I like it. So we've played around with the text, and the nice thing is we didn't even need to build the app as everything is just being reflected in this preview. But what if we want to see the app? Well, you can see this triangular green button at the top of the IDE, and if you hover over it, it says Run App, and you can also just do Control R. And what this does is that it runs the app on an emulator. An emulator is basically a virtual device that's installed on your computer when you install Android Studio, which is very nice because that means we don't need to even have a physical device in order to test the app that we're building. And another nice thing about Emulator is that it's very customizable. So for example, we can customize its aspect ratio or the screen size or the density of the pixels, or even the API version to simulate an older device without needing to have those physical devices. For now, let's just use the default emulator that comes with Android Studio. In my case, it's this Pixel 3a API 33 blah blah blah, which is more than enough for testing our starter project. We can try to update the name here. Say, greeting, droid girl. Okay, you might notice that the emulator didn't get updated instantaneously like the preview did. And this is expected because every time we make a change, we will need to rebuild the app in order for it to be reflected on our emulator. So let's hit Run App or do Control R again, which rebuilds the app and launches it on our emulator. And you can see that the name is now updated. Cool. So far we've looked at this main area, which is called the editor tool window, where we do our coding. But I also want to show you a different part of the IDE, which is this area on the left-hand side. And this is called the project tool window. And if you don't see it open, you can find this label called project and just click it to toggle the visibility. By default, Android is being selected as the view type for the project tool window, which is kind of like a nice and concise view, but you can also change it to different types of views, such as here we're choosing project files, which sort of just expands all the folders. It's kind of reminiscent of a more typical file structure view if that's your jam, but personally I like Android because I like simplicity and I find too much information to be overwhelming sometimes, but it's really up to you which view you use. I want to quickly go over the file structure for a typical app. You'll see that there are a few main folders, and the first one being manifests, which contains a file called Android manifest.xml. You don't need to know a whole lot about it just yet, but just know that it contains some critical information about the app that the operating system should be aware of. The main folder that we're going to work inside of is this Kotlin plus Java folder. It has 3 subfolders inside. The first one is where most of our source code for the app lives, and you'll see that our main activity lives there, and there's some theming code that's inside as well. The next 2 folders are both tests folders. You might wonder what's the difference between Android test and test. I know it can be really confusing, but generally Android test is where we put our instrumental or end-to-end tests, where test just contains unit tests. The next folder here is this res folder, which basically stands for resources, which refers to assets for the app that are not code. So for example, it can be static images, it can be our app's launcher icons, or some static values. And as you can see, there are already some files inside of it. We have 4 subfolders. For now, we don't need to understand everything deeply, but just know that this is where sort of the static assets for the app live. Okay, the next folder is a generated res folder, and since it's generated, we don't need to worry too much about it. The last place that we're going to look at is this Gradle scripts folder, which is technically not a real physical folder in the file system, but rather a grouping of Gradle files, which are used for various tasks that relate to the building, the testing, and the deployment of our app. So for example, if we open build.gradle.kts module app, we'll see that it contains a lot of information. And if you scroll down to the bottom, you'll see a block called dependencies, which basically contains the libraries that our app depends on for various tasks. You'll see that each dependency has a name and a version number, which helps Gradle download the appropriate version of that library to build our app. And there's a lot more information that these Gradle files contain, and I won't go over them today because I don't want it to be overwhelming. And I know that Gradle can be pretty overwhelming for not only new Android developers, but also experienced ones like myself. So don't worry if these files don't make a lot of sense just yet. And just know that the majority of our work will be writing normal Kotlin code instead of these alien-looking Gradle files. Okay, I think this is a good point for us to end the video. Today, we took our first steps into Android development. We downloaded and installed Android Studio, we set up a new project, we customized our app a little bit, and we went over the basic file structure. I hope that was interesting and fun for you, and if you have any feedback, please let me know in the comment section below. And in our next video, we're going to build on top of what we have today and make our greetings app a little more interesting. I'll see you next time.